The forest was shrinking, but the trees kept voting for the axe. For the axe was clever and convinced the trees that because his handle was made of wood, he was one of them. Many employees trusted and even paid trade unions without realizing that these unions may unintentionally be contributing to the chopping of employment in South Africa. Welcome to Citizen Concerned, where we remind you to beware of the comrades. I'm Katlego and would appreciate it if you subscribed to our YouTube channel, liked and shared this video with other citizens. What led to the rise of China? Why is China so skilled? Why is China creating cars, phones, and clothes for the world? China started rising from an era where they had suffered painful poverty due to the failures of communism. When their supreme leader, the communist Mao Zedong, died, their new leader, Deng Xiaoping, started reaching out to countries that were more successful than China. He didn't try to reach out to Russia, Cuba, or North Korea. He reached out to the capitalist countries to learn from them, but more importantly, to get them to come to China and invest in factories to begin the industrial rise that we now see in China. China had no skills, but it had people. Too many people who were unemployed. Too many people who had no sources of income. They didn't want minimum wage. They wanted jobs first. And guess what? Jobs came. Coca-Cola, IBM, Pierre Cardin, Nike, Apple, Procter & Gamble, Gucci, Dow, and many others moved their manufacturing overseas to China. And that led to the employment and upskilling of China's citizens. China said it was communist. It tried it out. It led to the starvation and death of many of its citizens. Instead of sticking to that path and saying we are not capitalists, they invited these Western companies into what they called special economic zones, where capitalism would work without the hindrance of communism. Deng Xiaoping did not only invite American companies, he also went to Japan. Japan's Panasonic was the first foreign company to enter China to conduct manufacturing there. This was after Deng Xiaoping had visited Japan to check out the companies that were called the Pride of Japan. The following year, Panasonic started to manufacture in China. Mao Zedong died in 1976. Panasonic and Pierre Cardin entered China in 1978. Coca-Cola and IBM entered China in 1979. More companies like Intel and Ford also entered China. Why? Many American companies moved their manufacturing to countries such as Mexico. Why? It's simple. One example is a city called Detroit. It was a car capital of America. Detroit was a vibrant city with several car manufacturers producing cars both for America and many other countries. But it all came crashing down.
Detroit, at one point in time, was one of the richest cities in the country. Detroit was a huge hub. There was beautiful cars everywhere. America was making these cars, and they were selling like crazy. The industry was booming, and then they pulled it all out. Population plummeted to 700,000 with the highest unemployment rate, more than 16% in any major American city. The heavily automobile-centric industrial landscape of Detroit, established in the first half of the 20th century, led to rapid declines in population and economic output after automotive decentralization.
I think that means that they took their factories to other countries.
We're going to go over there because it's cheaper.
It's just business, baby.
Detroit lives were destroyed and Detroit became like a tiny city. Why? If at the end of every problem we ask why, then we have started on the right path. Detroit has gone through deindustrialization, which is not what we want for South Africa. We want industrialization, not the closing down of industries that led to the collapse of Detroit. Why did Detroit experience deindustrialization? Because companies moved. Why? Because Detroit had high labor costs. It was costing too much to run factories in Detroit. Again, why? Because of labor unions. Labor unions and their stupid, hostile demands drove away investments in Detroit. In the 1950s, car companies in Detroit provided livelihoods for more than 1.5 million people. Now the city of Detroit has less than 1 million people. Why? People have left Detroit. Why? Because there are no more jobs. Why? Because of labor unions demanding more and more and more.
I think that workers are entitled to this because they alone are responsible for the creation of the value that eventually makes out this particular profit.
Currently, South Africans are very poor. We need more jobs and we need more manufacturers. Guess what? We have the same problem that drove the fall of Detroit, the demands of unions. Unions, if they are not stopped, will be the end of the dreams we all have. Let's do a quick comparison. China has all the infrastructure that works, harbors, railways, airports, seaports that work efficiently. We don't. China has a highly educated population, and I'm not talking about lawyers or doctors in political science and social science. We're talking engineers of all types. We don't.
There's almost 2 million application developers in China that write apps for the iOS App Store. And these are some of the most innovative mobile apps in the world, and the entrepreneurs that run them are some of the most inspiring and entrepreneurial in the world. Also in the manufacturing space, China has moved into very advanced manufacturing. And so you find in China the sort of the intersection of craftsman kind of skill and sophisticated robotics and sort of the computer science world, that intersection, which is very, very rare to find anywhere, that kind of skill. Which is very important for our business because of the precision and quality level that we like.
To make matters worse, China has an average minimum wage that is almost equal to ours, and in some provinces, the minimum wages are lower than ours. China has a population of more than 1 billion people, which means that is a big market for the buyers of products.
And then, of course, the thing that most people focus on when if they're a foreigner coming to China is they focus on the market itself and the size market. And obviously, it's the biggest market in the world in so many different areas.
We don't even have 100 million potential customers. So compared to South Africa, 1, China's infrastructure is more efficient. 2, China has highly educated and skilled people. 3, China's minimum wage is low. 4, China has a higher number of potential customers. With all of this in mind, why should a company deal with the South African workers who are hostile instead of simply moving their factories to China? Why? Right here in South Africa, labor unions pushed for a minimum wage that was high for white people during apartheid. And what did the white companies do? They started employing black people for roles that were by law meant to be occupied by white people.
Apartheid laws limited how many blacks could be employed in particular industries and occupations, and forbade their being hired for work above certain levels in those industries and occupations. Yet white South African employers in competitive industries often hired more blacks than they were allowed to under the apartheid laws, and in higher occupations than those laws permitted. A government crackdown during the 1970s led to hundreds of firms in South Africa's construction industry being fined for violating those laws. Nor was the construction industry the only one in which competitive businesses were fined for hiring more blacks and in higher occupations than allowed under the law. In some other industries, blacks even outnumbered whites in some particular job categories where it was illegal for blacks to be hired at all. There is no compelling evidence that the white employers violating those laws had different racial views than the white legislators who passed such laws. What was different was that employers who failed to hire black workers whom it was profitable to hire paid a price for discrimination too, in the form of lost opportunities to make money.
These employers didn't hire black people because they loved black people more than the lawmakers or more than their competitors who chose to pay the high salaries to white people. They loved their companies and their profit margin more, and they refused to adhere to laws that stood in the way of their companies making a profit. The same can be said about companies that ended up setting up manufacturing plants in China. They didn't love China more than Japan or more than America. They loved their companies and profits more. If it makes financial sense for them to come to produce in South Africa, they will ditch China for South Africa. If it makes sense for companies in South Africa to leave South Africa, who will stop them from leaving South Africa? Right now in South Africa, there is minimum wage. And what are some companies doing? They're hiring foreigners without documentation, which disadvantages unemployed South Africans who may be willing to earn the amount being paid to undocumented foreigners. Are these companies hiring undocumented foreigners because they love them more than they love South Africans? No, they love their companies and their profits more. People judge companies for wanting to make profits as if profit is not the main reason why companies exist. You start a company and tell me if running it at a loss or at minimum profit makes sense to you. People join unions to protect them from the greedy, profit-seeking companies. My question is, what has this protection by the unions led to for the average South African? Unfortunately, many people have fallen for the lies that unions will save them. I mean, look at these ones making these demands.
About 3,000 members of NUMSA staged a demonstration outside their workplace at Ford SA in Silverton. They're demanding the company to share accumulated profits. They say Ford SA is generating billions of rand annually, but only management, executives and shareholders benefit from the dividends.
45.8 billion cut this first quarter. Last year, by real profit, we had 25 billion cut 2023. Cut 2022, Ford gross profit was $23 billion. Hey, this guy lose a makoma. Dollars. Hey, ki company ama America, he get dollars. Cut 2021, by real gross profit, Comrades had $21.7 billion.
At the moment, what we're fighting for a principle, and the problem is that we're dealing with management that refuse even to engage on the principle first. We say to them, let's sit down, let's agree on a principle that if Ford declare dividends, we must agree on what percentage should be ring-fenced for workers as it is done for executive, as it is done for management. This is not a new phenomenon. It's there in Europe, it's there in France.
The profit is a result of the value created by workers, and workers are entitled to a share of that particular. So
Give us. You have a job which is a source of income. You are getting skills that can help you start your own company or make you more competitive in the job market. You get training that you can add to your CV. The investors, who are just people that took their money to build factories and buy machinery, must now give you the profits that they started their companies for. They invested millions and billions into the South African car-making industry. That's billions into South Africa, billions to SARS for our government to use to improve South African lives.
Now, Ford has made its biggest investment in South Africa in 97 years. The company has pumped up to 15.8 billion of the investment into our automotive sector. Ford and government joined forces in the multi-billion rand Tshwane Automotive Special Economic Zone project 14 months ago.
Sure, most definitely. It is quite confusing and shocking given the fact that such a big company is willing to invest so much into our country at such a very difficult time. But
that is billions that has allowed for more businesses to thrive, businesses that are suppliers to Ford. And it does not stop with direct Ford suppliers, but it extends to taxi businesses that transport workers to Ford, clothing businesses that Ford employees buy clothes from to come to work, food businesses that Ford employees buy their breakfast and lunch from as they're at work. Ford may not directly be giving money to the taxi drivers, to Woolworths and Mr. Price, to the coffee shop, Mr. D or Uber Eats, or that mama selling the fat cakes and the plate of food during lunchtime. But the income that Ford gives to the employees makes it possible for the employees to spend on these small, medium, and large players in the South African economy. And after all of that, SARS gets to benefit as well. But if Ford comes out and says, we ran a loss and we can't afford an increase or we can't afford to pay bonuses, you go out and you doi. Without telling you, they take out loans to pay salaries when things are not doing well. But no way, we work hard. We saw how many cars were made and sold, so we know that there must be a profit and we must have some of it. Now you don't want to work. Now they owe you. Ford made billions in profits, therefore that money should come here, it should come this direction. They only care about the executives. They only care about the shareholders. These people, who are the shareholders that they keep talking about? Who are these executives that they are talking about? The shareholders are not always who you think it is. Let me show you what I mean. Companies like Old Mutual or the PIC, which is the Public Investment Corporation, are companies that have your retirements. They invest in companies like Ford. They buy shares in companies like Ford to make sure that they get profits, which are sometimes reflected in the money you get when you retire. In which case, the Ford shareholders are normal people, be it poor people or wealthy people like you and I. Don't assume that shareholders are some evil people sitting in a boardroom somewhere. Do you remember that the PIC invested in Steinhoff? That was a bad investment, right? But some of that money could be in Ford. Then the losses made from Steinhoff are covered by the profits made elsewhere in other companies like Ford and many other private companies that make millions in profits, sometimes even billions in profits. The PIC, which is the Public Investment Corporation, is the one that handles the retirements of all government employees. When they make good investment decisions, the shareholders who benefit are the government employees. And when they make bad investment decisions, the shareholders who lose are the government employees. Just like the PIC, Ford is not a company owned by one person anymore. It is a company that even simple people own a portion of through shares, and when unions and their members behave in a way that hinders production and as a result profits, those simple people feel it in their pockets too. Truly speaking, South African unions are spoiled brats. They don't know the effect of their actions, or maybe they just don't care. The trade union agreed on the money they want from Ford, but now that they know that Ford makes a specific profit, they are breaking the agreement to demand for even more.
The company is arguing that the profit sharing is not a principle and goes against the spirit of collective bargaining at industry level. It says workers are entitled to make proposals but can't deviate from the National Bargaining Forum's agreement, in a session that the union has slammed.
This has been our contention all along, that the company would want to use all manner of technicalities, legalities to undermine the genuine demand of workers. You could hear from the whole argument in this court that they are dealing with rights. They are not dealing with a question whether do workers deserve or not. They are actually dealing with a big question whether we have a right to demand or we don't have a right. And you could follow their argument. They are seeking to abuse the NBF agreement. The NBF agreement has no provision for profit sharing. Secondly, you can see that they are really trying to use any possibility. They are also seeking to undermine and use and abuse collective agreement that regulate incentive bonus. Only managers here in this plant smile their way to the bank when workers get peanuts in a form of something that is called incentive bonus scheme. So the benefits, as you have seen, the profit, I mean, for last year alone, over 25 billion profit has been made by this company. Who are the beneficiaries? Are the executives? Are the shareholders? Are the managers? Workers are getting absolutely peanuts whilst they are working for a multinational company like Ford. They are very stubborn, they are arrogant, they are refusing to negotiate with us.
Well, it's back to the drawing board for the National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa, NUMSA, at Ford after the company was granted an interim order for striking workers to immediately return to their posts. Now, the motor manufacturing company approached the Labour Court on an urgent basis yesterday in a bid to block the strike action at the company's plant in Silverton. Now, the workers downed tools calling for profit sharing at the company, a move opposed by the company, which argues this is an incentive demand that has already been accommodated in a signed 2022 wage agreement at the National Bargaining Forum. The workers aired their frustration, with some saying they won't return to their posts.
Who is behind all of this? Trade unions. Trade unions push employees to do this. Why? Because if employees win, then the trade union workers and leaders get money from their union members when they make their monthly contributions. But if Ford closes, does the trade union close too? Nope. There are still many other union members, employees at other companies paying into the union membership every month. But guess what? Your job is gone. And you may say, it's okay, I'll get another job. The problem with that prospect is that many other companies may refuse to invest in South Africa. They may be unwilling to establish their branches here because of South Africans. Well, South Africans know their rights. There are rights to the company profits. And because of that, they may be deterred from opening branches here and potentially giving you employment opportunities.
We have negotiated with the company for over 2 years now, saying to the company they must invest in workers' benefit. They must improve bonus for the workers for the past 2 years. With all the investment that the Ford did in facility, in infrastructure, they have failed to invest in the benefit of workers for the past 2 years. As a result, we declared a dispute. We went to the CCMA. We got a certificate to strike. That strike notice we issued to Ford is a strike notice that says that we are on strike until Ford comes to the table, negotiate, make a reasonable offer to the workers. In particular, agree with the principle of profit sharing, because
that's the behavior of Comrades. They want to make it seem like you're being abused, even though you have a minimum wage, even though you have some monthly incentives, even though you have a yearly bonus. You deserve more because if it was not for you, this company would not be making these profits. Yeah, ne?
Core of our demand and the demand of workers is that every time when we see surpluses which leads to accumulation and business growth by many of these business enterprises under capitalism, it is because of the labor that is rendered by the working people, that there is no additional surplus value except that it is created by the working people. So we do not think that it is good that the company only rakes in profits and shares them with the shareholders and as dividends, but without sharing such particular amounts with workers. We think that workers are entitled to this because they alone are responsible for the creation of the value that eventually makes out these particular profits.
If really it's all about the hard work of the laborer, why is it that these unions do not take all their members, which is a lot of labor, and replicate what Ford has done? I mean, Ford is standing because of the hard work of the union members. I get it. So Azishe, union members and union leaders, start your own Ford, create your own profits and share as much of that profit as you desire. The Detroit buildings are vacant. Why are the hard-working laborers and union members not occupying them and making the profits that they were making for the automobile companies that previously occupied them? Because it is not that simple. Let's not be lied to by these comrades, because their lies may result in a huge loss of our current and future job opportunities. And what is this? What is this?
Now, the National Union of Metalworkers of South Africa has warned Gautrain commuters that services may be interrupted tomorrow. The union saying it has served the operating company Bombela with a 48-hour notice to strike. Of course, Bombela operates the Gautrain service. NUMSA says that wage talks with the employer have deadlocked. The union is demanding a 13% wage increase, greater medical aid contribution and a 2,000 rand housing allowance for its members. NUMSA claims that workers are also being treated unfairly and forced to work an extra day without compensation. Union members are planning to down their tools from 6 a.m. tomorrow.
The negotiations reached a deadlock, resulting in an indefinite strike by workers affiliated with the union earlier this week.
We have submitted our demands. Where we are currently is that we are demanding 9% increase. We've already shifted our position from 13% to 9%. We have already indicated that on other demands, like for example, there was a demand for an increase in the housing allowance to 2,000 rand. There was a demand around medical aid. We've said that we are willing to tweak some of those demands.
1 week, NUMSA members are striking against Ford. The next week, NUMSA is encouraging Gautrain employees to down tools, requesting what? 13%. 13! Who gets 13% salary increases these days? So they already get medical aid contribution but want more. And in addition to that, they want a 2,000 rand housing allowance. I don't get any housing allowance. I mean, how many of you people get a housing allowance? If this is how South Africans treat companies which employ them, how many more companies do we expect to invest resources into establishing companies in South Africa? We need to be very careful, South Africa. Very, very careful. I mean, it's not like we have jobs left, right, and center with no one wanting them. Anyway, that's it from me. Thank you for watching. Like this video, please. Share it with other citizens. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'm Katlego. This is Citizen Concerned. And until next time, beware of the comrades.